And now a word from our friends at Prose Playground. This June 10th, Prose Playground welcomes Anne Lamott and Neil Allen for a free community-wide In Conversation. On May 18th, the 10 Spreadsheets event will give you everything you need to know to launch your book. To join both events for free, visit proseplayground.com and sign up today. Welcome to Let's Talk Memoir, a podcast for memoir lovers, readers, and writers. I'm your host, Ronit Plank. Let's Talk Memoir is also a Substack newsletter. About once a month, I publish memoir craft advice, answer questions about memoir writing, and share my latest classes and upcoming events. You can go to substack.com and subscribe to Let's Talk Memoir for free. You can also find me, Ronit, on Instagram and on Blue Sky. Today, my guest is Timothy Schraeder Rodriguez, who spent almost a decade in gay conversion therapy, all while working behind the scenes at some of the most influential evangelical Christian megachurches. After embracing his identity as a gay Christian and stepping away from church work, he co-founded Church Clarity, an organization that helps queer people find affirming faith communities. His story and work have been featured by BBC NewsHour, Time, NBC, Vice, The Washington Post, Huffington Post, and Religion News Service. Born in the Midwest, he now calls New York City home, where he continues his work as a writer, digital strategist, and advocate for queer people of faith. His first book is Conversion Therapy Dropout, a queer story of faith and belonging. Welcome, Timothy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy that you're here. I'm just really excited about this. And I would love to begin by having you share a bit about your new memoir, Conversion Therapy Dropout.
Yeah, so it's my story of going through almost a decade of conversion therapy while working in some of the most influential evangelical Christian megachurches. And I think what differentiates it a little bit from some of the other conversion therapy books that are out there, which are fantastic, is mine kind of traces what life looked like after and also how I managed to keep my faith without losing my soul.
Yes, and this is the first conversion therapy book I've read, actually.
Oh,
So I'm
wow.
very new to the genre, and I absolutely, completely enjoyed reading your memoir.
Oh, thank
I
you.
felt for you, of course, and I think you told it in such dynamic ways. And
Mm.
I have so many questions. I'm going to try to restrain myself and go in order. But when did you have the sense you'd write this book?
The first time I read Boy Erased, which is by Garrett Conley, that came out in 2016. And that was the first time I had read another story of someone who had survived conversion therapy. And reading his story, I identified with it so much, but I also realized we all have different experiences. And I knew at some point I would probably write my story down. And funnily enough, I had all of like the journals and notebooks and things from my time in conversion therapy that I always held on to, even after I dropped out, because something in me said I was going to do something with those eventually.
Right, and you were already in communication and marketing, so
Yeah.
you probably had a sense of your voice, right?
Yeah.
Before you really started working on this manuscript, did you sort of have a narrative in mind, or did you start thinking about, "Oh, I'd probably start it here." Were you already kind of working on that?
Yeah, I think it's always been in my mind and heart to kind of sketch out what I thought I was going to do and how I would tell the story. And I took a writing class. I took a memoir writing class about 4 years ago. And I think that's really when the process got serious. But
Yeah.
I always had a sense I would eventually write the story.
Yeah. Well, when you began, what surprised you about the writing process? What were some of the more challenging aspects of completing the manuscript?
Yeah, I think the difficult part was just having to revisit a lot of those traumatic experiences
Mhm.
and kind of, try to write something that told the truth about what I experienced, but also didn't feel so heavy the whole time. Like I was trying to like channel Augustine Burroughs and David Sedaris a little bit to kind of
Mhm.
weave in some dark humor.
Mhm.
But, I took a memoir writing class, and that was such a transformational experience for me because writing is something that you do in isolation, but kind of having a community of people around me
Mm-hmm.
who were advocating for me and advocating for my story and helping me kind of craft and shape what eventually became the manuscript was super beneficial. And I think having all of that source material in the journals and notebooks and things that I kept was super helpful just to fill in some gaps of things that I'd either blocked out or just forgot just because
Mm.
of the time that had lapsed between some of those things that happened and today. But I think it was surprising through the entire process of writing, just kind of looking back at all of those experiences with my present day awareness of who I
Mm-hmm.
am and just all of those things that I know now today that I didn't know back then, and just sort of being a present day witness to all of the past was interesting.
Oh, I really like the way you said that, a present day witness to the past. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's getting at something that occurred to me while you were talking, which is that it seems like you might have had the ability to really see yourself as a character from
Mhm.
back then when you were writing this, which
Yes.
might have been helpful.
Super helpful, and I would have never said it like that, but you're exactly right. Like, I definitely was thinking of the younger version of me, and there were 2 people that were at work in the book. There was the younger version of me and then present version of me kind of swooping in at different times to kind of give my present day awareness of, "Okay, I know this happened, but this is what was really going on."
Well, that was hard for me when I was writing my memoir, actually. It took
Mhm.
me a while. I was new to memoir, but that kind of toggle really
Yeah.
challenged me. I didn't know how much to leave the young me alone and how much to get in there under the hood and sort of adjust
Yeah.
stuff. How many years out from, I mean, I know it's an ongoing process, this identity and finding out who you are and how we evolve all the time, but how many years out from having really embraced the fact that you were gay
Mhm.
was it when you started really working on the memoir?
I started working on it 5 years ago, and
Okay.
so and I left conversion therapy in 2010, so, like, 11 years, I guess, I had
Mhm,
lapsed,
mhm.
and I think an important thing to note in that was I got sober almost 5 years ago, and it was
Oh.
really once I got sober, I think that I actually could kinda look at my past with a new perspective and a new lens, and also just be able to write truthfully about those experiences and from a place of honesty, but also, sobriety. If you do the 12 steps, is all about, making peace with your past and seeing how your past can help others. And so I think in writing my story down, it was less about wanting to avenge what happened to me or tear down some of those organizations and institutions that I was a part of, but saying like, hey, how can I use this experience to help someone else? And how can my story hopefully help someone else not have to encounter what I went through, or to walk
Mhm.
people who have no familiarity with conversion therapy or high controlled religious environments to know what it's really like on the inside of those.
Yeah, it was so new to me, and, of course, church was well, you don't know this, but church is new to me because it's I didn't grow up in a church.
Yeah.
Grew up in synagogues to an extent,
Yeah.
and I know about the mega churches. I've watched The Righteous Gemstones, and I'm aware of some of the
Shockingly
church
accurate. Yeah.
I'm aware of some of the churches and some of the things like Mars Hill that were
Oh,
happening over
yeah.
here in Seattle, and
Yep.
so I sort of am aware of it from that standpoint, but the lengths to which people had you go and you had your
Mhm.
body and yourself go to try to avoid the truth of who you were is
Mhm.
heartbreaking, and I didn't realize how enmeshed it is in that type of church culture if you're not in a queer
Yeah.
friendly church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the most dangerous parts of conversion therapy is that it's, pseudoscience along with this like added layer of spirituality or spiritual discipline. And so it really, if you are a person of faith, has a strong bearing on how you view spirituality and your connection with God, however you choose to define that. And it's really devastating.
Yeah, especially because as an adolescent, you write that you found yourself in the church. I mean, this is where you
Yeah.
found your community. This is where you
Yep.
found some of the skills that you were good at.
Oh yeah.
And there's this excerpt that I picked from page 80,
Yeah.
which can you set the scene, maybe how old you are and what
Yeah.
this conference or camp is? Yeah.
Yeah. So I was probably like 22, 23 at this time. And Exodus International was the largest conversion therapy organization at the time. And it was a network of about 200 ministries across the United States that performed conversion therapy. And once a year, they would do an annual conference to kind of get all of their ministries and people a part of it together. And so I went to this conference. This was from the first conference I attended in 2005. It was in Los Angeles on the campus of a Christian university. And it was my first time really being in a big group of people who were struggling with the same thing that I was. And a lot of people would maybe assume that seems like a bad idea to get people who are all kind of wired
They're
the
like,
same way.
don't catch feelings for each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't like each other too much.
Right. But, one thing I'm quick to say about that is like safe assumption and things like that would happen. But we were all there because we were desperate to change. Like we were there, we paid thousands of dollars to be there, took a week off of work or a week away from our lives. So we showed up there because we were serious and believed that there was something there that could help us. And so where this part of the book kind of picks up is they had anyone who was under the age of 26 in their own little separate area. So there was about 300 of us who were young people, and we had our own like evening activities after the normal programming ended. And so that's where this picks up. Should I go ahead and read it?
Yes, please do.
Okay, awesome. So another night, one of the guys from Orlando, Micah, who worked at Disney World playing the roles of Peter Pan and Prince Charming, plugged his iPod into the soundboard. The opening notes to Stronger by Britney Spears were blaring through the speakers seconds later. With a mischievous grin, Micah snatched a folding chair and bounded to the front of the room. As if possessed by the spirit of Britney herself, he straddled the chair and launched into a sizzling rendition of her infamous dance routine. The room was a mix of shocked gasps and delighted squeals. Some people covered their eyes in mock horror, while others, like me, cheered him on. Just as Micah was about to get really into it, Josh ran to the front of the room and, with a dramatic leap, kicked the chair out from under him, screaming, "Where is the fear of the Lord in this place?" The room exploded into hysterical laughter. Micah sprawled out on the floor, was laughing harder than anyone. From that moment on, "Where is the fear of the Lord in this place?" became the standing joke whenever people crossed the line with their humor or dared to let their fabulous flag fly just a little too high. Looking back, it's hard to reconcile that some of the happiest memories of my young adult years happened in one of the most harmful environments I've been a part of. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that's why they kept all of us under a certain age together and made sure we were entertained. The late nights, the joking, silly skits and games, and the laughter all created the illusion of freedom, and it worked. Moments like these, the late nights, the way anything and most innocent thing could be sexualized, and the tender ways we could let glimpses of our gay selves come shining through, made the trauma easier to endure. I believe that's what kept me in conversion therapy longer than I might have stayed otherwise. In those moments, we were free to be our true selves, even if we were doing our best not to be. The joy wasn't fake. The people were real. The system we were a part of was broken, but we mistook the momentary belonging for true acceptance. It gave us just enough to sparkle, then asked us to snuff it out. The remainder of the week was an emotional roller coaster of laughter, tears, and moments of genuine connection. But more than anything, it left me with a sense of possibility. Yes, certain things still didn't make sense to me, but I couldn't deny the powerful testimonies I'd heard or the sense of community I'd experienced. I had come hoping for answers. Instead, I left with a notebook full of conflicting strategies, a head full of questions, and the creeping suspicion that no one there was entirely sure how this was supposed to work. And yet, I didn't question any of it. How could I? 1,200 people were there. Tens of thousands had walked this path before. The sheer size of Exodus was proof that it worked. If all these people believed it, how could I not? If they had hope, why couldn't I? Maybe the problem wasn't Exodus. Maybe the problem was me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You write in the book that, like other facets of my identity, being adopted and maintaining a relationship with my biological family, being Mexican American, and being a sober alcoholic, I'd become adept at living in contradictions. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how writing this memoir impacted your sense of identity.
Yeah, it was a crash course in all of the different contradictions I lived in. And if you read it, I'm sure you kind of got the sense of like I was all over the place because I was looking for a place to belong. And
Hmm.
I grew up adopted, but having a relationship with my biological family. And so from the beginning, I never really felt like I fully belonged to either of my families. And so that's why the church became so important to me. That's why I
Hmm.
was so drawn to it. And so I think throughout most of my life, I was looking for this sense of identity, but it was always outside of myself. It was always in other places or in other experiences. And thankfully, I came to the place of being secure in who I am and owning my identity and who I am as a person. And one of the things that I did do throughout the entire process of writing the book was have my therapist on speed dial. I
You're
actually
not the first memoirist to say
no,
that.
right? And I mean, I literally would send him chapters as I was writing and being like, we need to talk about this because
Mhm.
I knew my story in a linear way of just how it was my lived experience. But as I started to write it down, I just started to make so many connections that I had not seen before or realized things that just had kind of been oblivious to me in the past. And so, with that present day perspective, was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, I know I thought I was doing that because of this reason, but actually it was rooted in this idea. And so,
Mhm.
my therapist was very, very helpful to help me kind of make sense and think through, how do I talk about these things in a truthful way, but write about it in a way that, honors that innocent, naive version of myself that was grasping for anything and kind of have that loving present day person saying, like, it's okay, like, you were doing your best.
Yeah, it really does come through. And I'm so happy we're talking about these contradictions because in memoir writing, the way that I learned it, the way that I teach it, the contradiction is really so much fire in your
Oh,
manuscript. It's
yeah.
so much about the divided self and how we may
Yep.
want one thing, but we keep doing this other thing. And that tension is alive throughout all your pages because we see you
Mhm.
basically on this quest to figure
Mhm.
out how to reconcile this.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah.
what adds so much energy
Mhm.
and stakes to your narrative. And
Mhm.
there's this one point, I've got a couple of mini quotes I want to share, but in context, this is when the church where you work at, Park Church, I believe,
Mhm.
the head, well, maybe you can give me the language because I don't even know.
Lead
Is this,
pastor?
yeah, the lead
Yeah.
pastor. As a humble Jew, I'm not sure I know the terminology, but
All good.
so they ask you, can you give testimony, right? Can you come
Mhm.
up in front of the congregation and talk about what you've been struggling with? And
Mhm.
so you do deliver that. You say yes, you do it.
Mhm.
And in part, I think it's because you don't want to get in trouble with the church. You want to hold on to your
Correct.
position,
Yeah.
even though you're starting to have a little bit of a struggle here. So
Yeah.
here's the first quote I pulled. As the congregation rose to their feet to give me a standing ovation, I couldn't tell if I felt a deep sense of pride or shame. The applause wasn't really for me, but for the curated version I'd presented of myself that still fit within their theological framework, one who was, quote, struggling well. And then I've got this quote from another part of the book, quote, the gap between the truth I was beginning to embrace and the story I was still telling was growing wider by the day. Something would eventually have to give. And
Mhm.
you also write, quote, this was my reality. The same mega churches and celebrity pastors who trusted me to shape their messages asked me to keep my identity secret. I was gay and somehow still a Christian. So,
Mhm.
I pulled just a couple of quotes. It's really hard to choose, but I'm curious. This is like the $1 million question for me. Where are you now with religion
Mhm.
and its approach to acceptance?
Yeah. I I understand why queer people leave churches because when you are part of a system or a religion that is so, in most instances and most iterations of it, insistent on the idea that who you are is fundamentally broken or that there is something deeply flawed with you, and that in order to have a sense of divine connection, you have to fundamentally reject yourself and reject what's core to who you are. And I completely understand why folks who are confronted with that would want to leave those systems and have nothing to do with them. I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, I think we're all complex people. We're a body, soul, and spirit. And so I think that we do a huge disservice to queer people. Religious communities do a huge disservice to queer people to make them feel like they have to choose between their spirituality or their sexuality. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm so grateful that around the time that I was wrestling with these things and when I was deciding to walk away from conversion therapy, that I encountered an organization that was called the Q Christian Fellowship today, but it was an organization of, LGBTQ people who also were still committed to the Christian faith. And I was just I'm so grateful that I found them and that they kind of showed me like, no, there is another way. You don't have to give this all up. You can still hold on to this, but reframe your relationship with it. And I definitely fought for my place in the church. I stayed in the system of mega churches way too long, thinking that if I stuck it out on the inside, I could hopefully affect change for queer people within.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did finally walk away from all of that, I moved to New York City, started a new career. I did take a little break from church for a minute, and then in sobriety found myself back in church basements in
Mm-hmm.
recovery meetings. And spirituality is a huge foundational cornerstone to 12-step recovery, and it's all about getting into a relationship with the God of your own understanding. And so I would say that sobriety really gave me God back, but not the version of God that I had been so trained to fear or think was rejecting of me or rejecting of who I was as a person, but this loving force that's really been with me this whole time and has always kind of been that constant presence with me. And so I would say I'm a person of faith today. I don't like to say I'm a Christian just because that's a very loaded word
Mm-hmm.
in today's culture and the political climate that we're in. But I'm a true believer in God, and I believe that we're all called to love whatever God looks like to us and to love our neighbors as ourselves. And so I'm grateful that I have that connection and that I have found a spiritual community here in New York that is gay affirming. And going there, I'm not an exception. I'm not the majority or the minority. I'm not, they don't look at me as someone who needs to fix something. I'm welcome all of me as I am. And I think that that is really the true heart of the gospel.
Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that. There's this other excerpt that I decided to surprise you with, and I didn't even tell you what page. It is on page 112 to 113, and
Okay.
I'll tell you what it starts with Chad cackled, Gaby's first pride. This is a
Hmm.
historic day.
Hmm.
And that's on my page 112. I don't have a hard
Hmm.
copy. And then
Yeah.
it ends with the only price of belonging here was for me to be my whole self. Is that
Hmm.
okay for you to read that
Yeah.
one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you want to set it up just, where we are in time.
Yeah, totally. So this was the first time I ever went to a gay pride event and also my first time going into a gay bar. And Chad was a good friend of mine who came out, grew up in church like I did, but came out, and he was sort of my guide into the gay world. And in conversion therapy, we were always told to do what straight guys do and to fake it till we make it. And so a huge part of that, this is going to sound very crazy, is going to sports bars and watching sports and getting into sports and doing what guys do. And so there were so many times I would go to these horrible sports bars to watch football games I did not care about because I thought that that was going to help me become more like a man. And I would leave them feeling dejected and even worse than when I first got
Mhm.
there. And so this is sort of the juxtaposition of that. Chad cackled, Gaby's first pride. This is a historic day. Becca looped her arm through mine. Come on, hold on to me. I'll make sure you don't end up doing anything you regret. I followed them as we zigzagged past booths selling everything from sex toys to rainbow rosaries. Chad pointed out all the different bars like a tour guide. That's Roscoe's, he said, pointing to a bar with a line that wrapped around the block. They have great drag shows and good drink specials. But if you want to dance until 5 a.m., you'll want to go check out Berlin. I smiled like I was taking mental notes, even though I had no immediate plans to do either. Chad abruptly stopped our tour and asked, "Are you ready for the most important moment of your life?" I blinked. He turned and pointed to the entrance in front of us. The line stretched down the block, filled with people in varying levels of clothing, glitter, and beads. "Welcome to Sidetrack," Chad proudly announced. "Are you ready to lose your gay bar virginity?" I'm sure my face was a perfect mixture of terror and anticipation. The Bible verse, "Flee from any appearance of evil," rang in my ears. But my feet kept moving me closer to the door with my ID in hand. Once we were inside, what I saw took my breath away. It was nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of something small, dark, and secretive, like Exodus said places like this were, Sidetrack was bright, airy, and massive. Skylights and neon signs illuminated the space. There were multiple large rooms, a rooftop, and a patio that spilled onto the street. There was no shame or secrecy, only joy and celebration. And instead of sports playing on the TVs, Ariel swam across the screens, her voice soaring through the speakers as hundreds of people lifted their drinks and sang along to "Part of Your World." I choked back tears. I had spent years in sports bars with straight men, hoping that if I cheered at the right moments, I might finally feel like I belonged. But I never did. And yet, here, where instead of crowds high fiving for touchdowns, people cheered and tossed cocktail napkins into the air when Madonna sang "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina" from Evita, I wasn't an outsider. Chad nudged me. "Are you okay?" I smiled back. "I think so, but get me a drink." Exodus taught me that spaces like this were filled with emptiness, that God's presence couldn't possibly exist among bass lines and flashing lights. But watching hundreds of people find such uninhibited joy, I couldn't help but wonder, if God wasn't here, where could God be found? In the church basements where I had spent years begging to be different? In the counseling sessions where I tearfully confessed my failures to change? The freedom I experienced in that bar surpassed anything I'd witnessed in years of emotional church services or Exodus conferences. And that petrified me almost as much as it liberated me. I didn't have to alter my voice, movements, or laughter. The only price of belonging here was for me to be my whole self.
Thank you so much.
Of
What
course.
have you heard from early readers? Because at the time of this recording, your book is about to drop, but it isn't out there yet. But I know you have quite a few reviews, and I'm going to talk about the good news you've recently gotten. But what have people said to you who have been able to read this so far about the impact your memoir has had on them?
Yeah. Everyone I've talked to has said, "Don't read your reviews," but I can't help myself. and,
Yeah, I
and I
mean, what are
mean,
they kidding?
Yeah, I mean, I've been so overwhelmed with the kind words that I've read and that people have said about the book, and just how many folks who, like me, had been in conversion therapy or was wrestling with their sexuality in religious spaces and just finding a lot of identification with my experience. And you know, I I realized in writing this, like, yes, this is my story, but I'm speaking on behalf of a whole generation of people who went through conversion therapy like I did. And
Mhm.
so I really took the responsibility of telling my story seriously because it's not just mine. Like, yeah, this is my version of it, but I've just been so grateful that folks who have read it have seen their own experiences mirrored in it and have felt seen and heard and their experiences validated. And I think a lot of people did go through conversion therapy, but might not have necessarily labeled what they went through as that
Mhm.
because it wasn't in a traditional, they didn't go to the Exodus conference or they didn't go to the therapy that I did, but they were in spaces that said they had to change who they were. And so on their own, they were trying to figure out how to do that themselves. And so I'm very grateful that for those folks that they've found identification. And then on the other side, people who have had no connection to mega churches or to conversion therapy who just see that struggle for the sense of belonging and acceptance that's universal to all of us.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I've been really, really moved by what folks have had to say about it so far. And I'm just grateful that it's found resonance with people.
Yes, and I saw just recently that Goodreads has listed you as a book to read in May, or is it memoirs to
Yeah.
read in May? And then
Yeah.
also Book Riot covered your book.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it, in your post, you said that this was a surprise to you.
Yeah, like, I mean, literally both of those, I had other friends message me these things and I was like, "What?" And so I'm like, frantically like messaging my publicist and my publisher, like, "Did you all know this was happening?" And they said, "No, they didn't." And
Oh,
so
wow.
it feels really special. And I know that that's not the experience that a lot of debut memoirists get, but also, one of the things that's happened in the last month is that the Supreme Court has struck down a conversion therapy ban in Colorado that was put in place to try to protect young people from experiencing conversion therapy in therapeutic settings. And the fear is that, that decision is just going to be this domino effect
Mhm.
on the other bans that are in place in other states. And so I could have never predicted when I started to write this book or when we set the launch date very arbitrarily that the
Mhm.
book would be coming into the world in a moment when a story like this is needed. And so I'm just really thankful for the buzz and the excitement and that
Mhm.
in the midst of this being something that's talked about, that I'm able to offer my story to kind of help people understand the human side and perspective of what it's like to actually be in the middle of it.
Yes, and I do wanna add that the cover seems perfect. It seems like one of those covers that is exactly the cover it should have, and I'm curious if you can you talk a little bit about the genesis of the cover?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So, I mean, I'm sure you could
Yeah.
see the recording of
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I
It's
can see it, it's great. So it's a picture of you
that's
from
me.
very little, and it's
Yeah.
just the cutest picture ever, and
And
I mean,
I'm
a lot of memoirs do put a picture of the
yeah.
memoirist or something from their family on there, but this
Yeah.
this is just every time I see it, I think, "That is the perfect cover for your book."
Oh, thank you. I mean, so real quick on that. So it's a picture of me. I'm probably like 4, maybe wearing a crop top that says macho, which is kind of perfect because conversion therapy was all about
But
trying to
it's
make us
also
more
your
butch.
pose, right? It's
Yeah,
also
yeah,
your
just
pose.
I'm like and the title and the cover were like this work in progress. We had a lot of different working titles initially, and as we kind of were working on it more, like I wanted something that really said what this was all about and was a little confrontational. And so that's where conversion therapy dropout came in. And I was thinking it was going to probably be a childhood photo of me. And so I just was going through all these pictures that I had. And then I found this one and was like, that's the one. And then a fun little aside, I worked for a season at Hillsong Church, which was one
Mhm.
of the most influential
Yeah,
mega
I saw that
churches.
documentary too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a good
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
And my good friend that I worked with there, who did all of their graphic design and all of their marketing, is the person who designed my cover. And so it's kind of
That's a
cool for
nice full
me.
circle
Yeah,
moment.
to have the guy who made one of the biggest evangelical Christian brands design the cover to my very gay memoir is kind of a cool experience.
Yes. Yes, well, I know we're gonna be ending in a moment, but before I ask you my final questions, I do wanna ask if you have any suggestions for writers,
Mhm.
memoirists in particular, about engaging on social media or getting the word out about their work or connecting with people on podcasts, like you and I connected on
Yeah.
Instagram some time
Yeah.
ago, and then I saw that you had a book coming out. I looked it
Yeah.
up and I asked you to please come on.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
what what would you say? I know this is a giant question, but what is something for newbies on social media? What is a good way to get their story into the mix and get people to see them?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I know from experience that your platform as a writer actually really does matter, especially when you're trying to pitch an agent or pitch a publisher to sell your book. One of the first things that they will look at is what is your social media footprint, just the nature of the publishing industry. And I had some experience doing book launches for other authors in my past. Like I did book launches for megachurch pastors and
Mm,
influencers. So I had a little sense of how things worked. But I know today it's like super important that as a writer, I mean, it seems like a lot already that you're trying to write, but you do need to be present and active on social media because that's how you connect with other writers and that's also how you connect with potential readers. And so I would say if you kind of scroll back through my feeds a few years ago, I was not doing a ton. But
Mhm.
once I kind of got into the process, I was like, okay, I have to just start putting myself out there, putting my story out there,
Yeah, so you
and
would
not
share little snippets or
little
little takeaways,
snippets.
things like
Yeah,
that?
little takeaways, things that I was working on, taking people into the process of, "Hey, I think I wanna write a book. Hey, I'm in a writing
Mhm.
class. Hey, I am trying to queer it." Like, I mean, my whole journey is kinda documented if you scroll back.
Mhm.
And one of the things that really surprised me was how generous other writers are. Like,
Mhm.
I I made a list of, like, if I could have my dream endorsements, like, these are the people that I wish it could be, and it was, like, 30 people, and I have 25 endorsements, which is very extra,
Wow. Yeah.
but, those were people who were writers that I looked up to and I respected, and I started to follow them on social media and started to build a relationship with them and supporting them in their work, and so I wasn't a stranger by the time I came knocking on their door asking for an
Mhm.
endorsement, which in my opinion, is the most vulnerable part of this entire process is
Yeah,
getting those
asking
endorsements.
for a seat
Yeah.
at the table or for a little bit of
Yeah.
help, and I think what you're saying too reminds me that we do need to be generous. I mean, I talk about this a lot, when people ask me, we have to be generous, we have to share other people's
Mhm.
posts, engage
Yeah.
with them, not always an ask from us, but
Absolutely.
share about them and promote them
Mhm.
too.
Yeah, I mean, I think writing, especially today, is an act of resistance. Writing and reading are
Mhm.
forms of resistance. And I think memoirists, we've all been through something. And
Mhm.
most of us are kind of writing from that place of wanting to make sure other people don't experience what we experienced or to speak the truth about an experience people don't know about. And so I think of any writers of any genre, like we need to be the most supportive of one another.
Mhm.
And I will say there was one person in particular that endorsed my book who I had no relationship with whatsoever. It was like a friend of a friend connected us, and he graciously gave an endorsement. And then as we were kind of interacting after the fact, he said he had been in the same boat, first time
Mm.
writer, didn't really know anybody, and just the struggle that he felt of asking strangers to endorse him. And memoir is different because it's not just endorse my book, it's like validate me, validate my story. Like it's so
Mhm.
personal.
Mhm.
And he said that he's just made it a point to, whenever he's able to, say yes to every single person that asks him for a
Oh, that's
blurb.
really nice.
And, I've since then had a couple of folks reach out to me to offer blurbs for their books. And I've said, I will always try to pay that forward. Like it's been such a
Yeah.
huge support to me.
Yeah. Well, is there any last advice you want to share with writers working on their memoirs about the writing process?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about my writing group, and I think that if you're not part of a writing community or a writing group, do it because it changed my writing and it changed my book. And I know that my book is what it is today because of the input of other writers that helped me work on it and who supported me along the way. And one of the books that was really impactful to me early on was Alexander Chee's How to Write an Autobiographical Novel.
Mhm.
Loved that book, and I saw a little bit later that he was doing a webinar on memoir writing, and so I signed up for it. And his first piece of advice was, if you want to write memoir, get into a writing community, find a class, do something. And I heeded that advice, and I think because I did, that's why I can hold this book in my hands today. And I
Mhm.
don't know if I would have just tried to do this on my own, if I would have ever made it happen.
Yeah, and this is because you mentioned the class early on, I was wondering how long form of a class was it? Was it months and months? Was it a year?
So initially, it was just a 10-week class,
Mhm.
and it was like just a 10-week thing. And there was something special. And even my teacher said this about our class. She's like, I've done this a lot. I've never had a class that's gelled this well together
Mhm.
before.
Mhm.
And so the core group of us stuck together for 2 years. Um,
Wow. With
and
the
like
teacher?
with the
Oh,
teacher,
that's wonderful.
same group, all of us. And like some new people came into the mix every once in a while, but like the core group of us was together for about 2 years, and they're still going strong. I just had to tap out because
Sure. You have a
this is
book.
I have a book and a full-time job outside of this. And so, but like the thing that's so cool is my book releases next week. I'm having a launch party here in New York, and there's about 5 people who are in my writing class who live all across the country that are coming in for it.
Oh,
And
wow.
like
Yeah, community.
it's so important. And I mean, I can't wait to read their books, and I will fly to wherever they are when their books come out. It took community to bring this to life.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Are
Yeah.
you've mentioned some books throughout our time together, and I will grab them and put them in the show
Mhm.
notes. Are there any other books you want to shout out that informed your writing process?
Yep. I would say queer stories saved my life.
Hmm.
Reading memoirs from other queer writers was so impactful for me, just in understanding who I was as a queer person early on, coming out late in life, and then just how I wanted to approach my writing today. I mean, anything by David Sedaris or Augustin Burroughs. I just love their dark humor and way of looking at the world. And I love them. I mentioned Alexander Chee's book, How to Write an Autobiographical Novel. Another one I would say is All Down Darkness Wide by Sean Hewitt. Beautiful, beautiful book. And then, I mean, classic Anne Lamott, Bird by Bird, like
Hmm.
just a must read. I would say those would be like the top ones that I would go back to time and again throughout my
Great.
process.
Thank you so much. I'll put them in the show notes. And finally, where can people find you,
Yeah.
connect with you, and get a copy of Conversion Therapy Dropout?
So if you go to conversiontherapydropoutbook.com, you can find everything about me, everything about the book. I am very active on Instagram and Threads at Timothy S. Rodriguez. And as far as buying the book, support your local independent bookstore and get a copy from them.
Yes. Thank you so much for being my guest. I'm so happy that you
Absolutely.
were here with me, and it's just been a pleasure. And congratulations on
Thank
your
you so
book.
much. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Memoir. For more about my story and the project that started me on my memoir loving path, you can check out my memoir, When She Comes Back, which is available wherever books are sold and as an audiobook that I narrated. For more about this episode and my guest, please visit the links in the show notes. You can also find a complete catalog of Let's Talk Memoir episodes at ronitplank.com/Let's Talk Memoir. Let's Talk Memoir is also on Substack. About once a month, I publish memoir craft advice, additional interviews, and upcoming classes that I'm offering. There's no paywall. If you are a fan of Let's Talk Memoir, please feel free to share it with your friends. And if you feel moved to leave a podcast rating and review, I appreciate it very much. That helps more writers and readers find the show. Thank you so much for being here.